Hey guys, this is Alex Pierce. I am so excited to show you our LED Stage Configurator, which is great for building LED walls out of 3D scans or otherwise, and making sure that they are UV unwrapped properly, the right shape, the right size. You can see we have a lot of great options that work really well for virtual production. So whether you're going to Unreal Engine or Assimilate Live Effects or Disguise or Pixera, this is a really easy way to visualize creating a stage and making sure that the model is output properly, that the UVs are correct. And if you use a 3D scan, you can actually really line up the height of the walls and everything based off the scan, and you can make sure that your tracking origin is in the correct place. We have a lot of great features. We have several LED manufacturers built in. We have columns and rows. We can do lots of really advanced stuff very quickly. So make sure to watch the rest of the video to get a full-on tutorial. One of the great things about this add-on is you really don't need to know anything about Blender to use it. First, you're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and if you're in Blender 4.2, you're going to click on this button up here. So you go to Add-ons over here and install from disk, go down to the file. Okay, so here it is here, LED Stage Configurator 5.0.0 is the one I'm on now. Keep it zipped up and do install from disk. Once you do, you'll see it's here. If this checkbox isn't checked, go ahead and check it. And let's go ahead and close this. Over here in the viewport, this is called the 3D viewport. If you press in, you'll get this menu over here to the side. You can also get to that by clicking on that little arrow there. And you can also drag this out a little bit and scale it up if you want to. But this is most of what you need is here in this panel. And the very first thing is import GLB Scan. I'll show you what that does here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and add a wall. I'm just going to add a blank wall. And now we get all these different options here. So let's just look through a very overview, and then we'll go back and we'll dig in. So we have this select panel. If you already know what your panel is, you can use custom dimensions. You can see here it's in millimeters. So let's say you know that your panels are 500 by 500. You could type that in here. If you have curved panels, you can check this box. But this is for when the panels themselves are curved. So if your wall curves, but it's faceted, you want to keep this off. I think most walls you're just going to keep this off. Wall settings, pretty obvious here. How many columns and how many rows. So if you have, exactly whatever you have, you put those in here. Flip wall normals, this is something I think you can, again, leave off by default. Maybe there's some fringe use cases where you might need to do this. Angle rotation is pretty obvious. You can change the rotation here. Now this next one, this is one of the main reasons I built this plugin, or that I had Mike build this plugin, and that is flat from center. A lot of stages are going to have a flat wall, and then it's going to curve around. So this actually is very important. By default, it's going to start with 8 there just by default, but you can see this is what it would be if you had no flat from center, and then if you had 2 flat from center, or 4 or 8. You can see that we can actually do some pretty amazing things with this. You can also do custom bending, and what that does is it allows you to bend certain sections and make J-shaped walls and that sort of thing. We're going to come back to this later on in the tutorial. Position rotation. If you're familiar with Blender, you can use the normal shortcuts, G to drag it around. So if I press G and then I do Shift Z, it's going to move it on basically on the X and Y axes. I got to remember my Blender axes. But you can also do it here, and especially if you've never used Blender before, I suggest just doing it here. This is easy enough. You can, if you know that, hey, I need to move this back, by however many millimeters, you can do it here. If you prefer to work in feet or meters, you can also change that in Blender. So to do that, you go over here to the this panel over here, and you can do search units, and you can see here in the scene properties here, you can change this to be Imperial, for instance. Now you can see these numbers are in feet. So if you know that your wall is by feet, you can move it in feet as well. I'm going to leave it at metric, but I think I am going to change it from, it was set to millimeters here. So I'm actually going to change mine to be meters, but they're all the same exact numbers. It's just kind of a personal preference. So anyway, so here's where you can, you can move your wall back, you can rotate it, you can do all these sorts of things. You can, again, if I press R and then RZ, it's going to rotate around the Z. So you can also, use these. The important thing is when we go to export that you do in fact export it from this tool. What that's going to do and why that's important is right now the origin point is in the center of the world, which is good. But if you start, especially if you scale stuff, but certainly if you move things as well, you're going to want to apply those before you export. So exporting it through the plugin is going to save you from all that. So before we talk about split walls, I want to look at the visualizer. So the visualizer has some cool things here. We can change the thickness of that line, which becomes important when you have, for instance, really tall walls or something like that. You can change the colors as well. But this UV gradient actually is what's really helpful. So if you turn this on, you can see the actual UVs. And if you don't mess with UVs and you don't understand UVs, don't worry too much about it. But it can be helpful, especially for this feature with split walls. And what split walls does is, let's go ahead and check both of these boxes. If I don't have my overlay on, my grid overlay, my UV overlays, then I can't sort of see what's happening when I check these boxes, because it basically, what these split walls does is, let's say this is your wall. Let me turn this on for a second. And let's say you have 4 sections. In fact, how do I want to do this? Yeah, I think actually this might make sense. Let's say you have one wall and there's 8 processors that feed it. So that's when you would use split wall. And let's say you want those 8 individual meshes. That's when you would use split walls. Now, usually, I think you would want, actually, I don't know. I don't want to pretend I know either. The UVs, you might want them to be 0 to 1. Or you might want them to be separate individual UVs. So this would be like wall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then have their own UVs. So there definitely are use cases where you might want either one of these. But even if you're not trying to split your UVs, it's helpful to see the visualization if you have, if you're trying to separate these models. This is one easy way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn both of those off for now. But that's where this overlay becomes really helpful, because you can see your UVs and make sure that they're laid out properly. Display normals is also pretty obvious. It shows you which way the normals are facing. This is a really easy and helpful way to make sure that the normals are the correct way. If we go up and we flip the normals, you can see what happens, that the normals are actually going the opposite direction. So being able to visualize the normals might be helpful depending on what you're doing. All right, so let's look at using the custom bending option here. So if I add a new wall, I use the custom bending here. What this is going to do, it's not going to do anything until we have some sort of angle selected here. So you got to make sure that your angle is selected. And so you can change the range several different times. And it can bend and do all sorts of things, and you can decide which column it starts and ends on. And so if it starts on 1 and then goes to 2, and then starts on 2 and then goes to 10, this is how you can make some really customized shapes here that might be very difficult to do otherwise in another program, and make sure that they are UV unwrapped properly. Obviously, a lot of this depends on the actual wall itself. I don't have a specific example in mind to show you. Just want to show you that it is actually possible. This shape now is going to be UV unwrapped properly. In fact, let's look and see what it looks like in Assimilate Live Effects. Now you can see what this might look like if it was done with a custom wall that was bent like this. Obviously, this is a kind of an extreme example. I have seen exhibits like this though, so I can see there need to be a use for this. And definitely for J shapes or walls that are really, really flat and then they curve, that custom bending can be a real powerful feature. Let's add a few different walls here. So let's add 3 different walls, and I'm going to select the first one. You want to make sure you have the wall selected that you want to affect. So move that back. This one I'm going to rotate 90 degrees, and I'm going to move it this way, and I'm going to do the same thing here. Oops. I'm going to select this wall. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Actually, yeah, I can already tell you one thing. I probably need to double check my normals here. Yeah, so I rotated that the wrong way. And it's better to actually rotate it the right way as opposed to flipping the normals. So I'm going to do 180. No, I'm going to do -90. All right, I'm going to do display normals on this one as well. I need to select it up here to affect it here. Make sure my normals are correct. You can also rename these. So let's say this is your main wall. You can go rename here, and we'll call this main. Okay. I recommend to do your functions here. You can. I think if you rename here, it'll be fine, but it's best to just use the add-on to do whatever you need to here. So I'm just going to go here and do left. Okay. And we'll call this right. And that way we'll just stay somewhat organized. You can also delete walls here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Let's just start all the way over. Export selected is going to export just the walls that you have selected. So if I have these two selected, I hold down Shift and select both of these and export that. I'm going to hide this and import, file, import, OBJ. You can see it only exported these two files. Export all is going to export all the files here. So if I just export this as all, and then I import to the all OBJ, you can see it has exported all three of those models individually. You can go up here and go down to face orientation and make sure the normals are facing the correct way. And of course, in our add-on, they are by default facing the correct way. Blue is right. Export selected as split wall you should only use if you are doing split wall. Even if this is not selected, it's going to take these numbers into account if you use this option here. So just be aware of that. Now let's look at importing stage as GLB Scan. I use a free app called Scaniverse on iPhone. And what that allows you to do is scan a 3D model. And then in Scaniverse, you can click on the model, go to export, export a GLB, and then share that with yourself. If you're on Mac, you can just airdrop it to yourself. It's very convenient. But I'm going to do import stage GLB Scan. And let's go to, I think it's in downloads. And I have a few different ones. I'm going to do curved stage first. So you can see it's imported my 3D model of my stage. Now, this is not, you don't have to do this, but I like to clean up my scan a little bit. And to do that, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to press N to get rid of the panel here. And if I press the tab, I go into edit mode. With this mesh selected, I may need to go into the root here. In fact, what I'm going to do, let's see if I press X on the root and delete that. I have my mesh here. It's still here. Okay, good. So now when I have this selected and I press tab, I can see the geometry and I can just clean this up. So I don't want all this extra stuff. So I can go up here to the menu up here, and there's this button here that toggles the X-ray. What X-ray does is allows me to select things through the other side, even through other geometry. So I can select, press X to delete vertices, and I can select some more and delete vertices. I can also use this widget here to enter into side view or top view. So I'm going to select the side view and just select all of this stuff on the top. Press X to delete. And yeah, you don't have to do this. I just like to sort of clean it up a little bit. And the other way I like to do is use C, which gives you this little selector that's like a circle. And then I can right click to get out of it, X to delete vertices. And for this stage and for this cleanup, that's fine. I just want to be able to see my stage a little bit cleaner. So now what you want to do when you have a stage like this is you want to line the stage up so that the origin of the world origin, if I press H to hide this model, This is the world origin where these lines intersect here. That's 0, 0, 0 essentially. So Alt H to unhide everything. So you want to put your tracking origin right here. So hopefully in your scan, you were able to capture the origin of your model. If it's at the base of your stage, for instance, you might move the stage to right there. I did that by pressing G and then Shift Z to move the stage. And Shift Z, what that does, basically if you press G, that moves. And then if you press X, Y, or Z, it's going to move in those axes. So X will move in X, Y will move in Y, Z will move in Z. If you push Shift Z, it's going to move in every axis except Z, or Shift Y will do every axis except Y, and same with Shift X. It's going to allow you to do that. So Shift Z will allow me to basically not move it up or down, but move it around. And in this case, I actually don't know where the tracking origin is. This isn't, I'm not sure where their origin is, but I'm going to say it's at the base of the LED panels. And what's great about having a scan is you can get in really tight and you can really line it up. So you can say like, oh, I want it to be right here. And I do recommend having like a piece of tape so you know exactly where that origin is. And then you might need to rotate it as well. So if I go here and then back, and then I come up, let's see, I might want to rotate this, press R and then Z to rotate this so that it's a little bit more straight on. But yeah, you can see this is something that, you know, having tape and having like a very specific reference would be great. In fact, if I moved it to here, that would be a good reference. If we knew that there was an X on our stage floor and we moved it right there, that would be a much better way of, you know, lining up our origin point. But anyway, lining up the stage is obviously very important because this is what we're going to base our model off of. So definitely spend the time to line it up exactly perfect for what you want. So now I'm going to go into our In panel. I press In on the keyboard. And here I'm going to add a wall. And I do have the information for this wall somewhere, but I can also probably use the scan to sort of determine a lot of information about this. But it is important that you know for sure what panel sizes you are, how many rows and how many columns to make sure that you're doing this right. So let's go look that information up. First is the panel settings. So the panel, we do have this drop down and you can select which panel you have. We are going to continue to add more here. If you have any suggestions, please let us know. But these are using the Unilumin panels, and that automatically puts in the information here. But again, if you know it custom, you can also dial that in here. This wall is 28 columns by 8 rows. So you can see we're already getting pretty close, which is good. So now what I might do is actually move our scan to match our newly created wall a little bit closer. So I'm going to press G and then X to move along X and just move it to the right just a little bit. And I'm going to probably refine this back and forth a few times. So you'll notice that there is a curve on this wall. And I actually don't know the curvature. I might have it written down somewhere. But I think we can figure this out just using our LED configurator. So if we go to curvature settings and we do angle rotation, I'm going to actually set this flat from 0 to be 0. So let's curve this to be 2 exactly, which is right now that's kind of close to what the curve is. But then it's definitely flat for a few different for a while. So I'm going to hide this by clicking this little eyeball, and I'm going to go into the scan and try to figure out if I can figure out how many panels it's flat for. So I think each one of these is one panel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Might be 7. It's a little hard to tell. This might be another one. So it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's either 7 or 8, I think. So I think we can be able to figure this out. So I'm going to click this eyeball to unhide it. We're going to do flat from center. We're going to do 7. And then we're going to curve it some more. So that's pretty close. Let's do 8. Yeah, 8. It looks like it's 8, which probably makes sense. When we made this LED configurator, we did use this stage as one of the examples. So it actually would make sense that 8 is the default because this is probably what the stage is. So now I'm gonna grab my scan, move it back to the right a little bit more so it lines up a little bit. The other thing you'll notice is that the wall itself is lifted up, and this is common. A lot of walls are sort of lifted up. So you also probably want to bring up the oops, wrong program. Let's see, the Z. And you can measure it as well. You can actually measure in Blender. But I think for me, at least if they're at this point, I think eyeballing it is okay. And then it looks like it curves a little bit more. So let me see. So yeah, it looks like it's probably 4 degrees with 8 panels in the middle. And it looks like our rotation of either the stage or the scan should be adjusted. So I'm going to rotate our 3D model. I'm going to rotate it around the Z. And that should be pretty close. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to go see if I can figure out if it was actually 4 degrees and 8 from the center. Okay, I checked my notes and it was in fact 4 degrees. So, and it looks like, I don't have anything in my notes about how far from center, but I actually was able to use the model itself to tell me that it's essentially 8. There's 8 panels from the center before it starts to bend. So now we have a very close 3D model, and if I hide this scan, you can see that, and this is true of a lot of stages, it's not quite, there is a little rotation. And most stages, there's going to be, when they build the stages, there's, it's never perfect. So there's a little rotation. The, where the origin point, especially depending on your tracking system, it could be way off. And having a scan is going to be really helpful to line that up. So now this is totally fine to export. So I'm going to go ahead and do export selected, and I'm going to call this curved example. And let's go ahead and look at another example. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to import stage. Go to desktop. So I have this multi-stage setup. So again, first thing I'm going to do is clean this up. This one's a little bit harder to clean up, so I'm going to go ahead and delete the root. So I'm going to click on the root, have this unselected, press X to delete, and I'm going to click on the mesh, put E for edit, tab for edit. I'm going to just sort of roughly clean this up. Select these, press X to delete. Let me make sure I'm not deleting the ceiling. Yeah, the ceiling is here, so I'm going to go up here and just delete that, delete that. I like to do big swatches first and then go back and refine a lot of the times. They do have a wild wall back here, and this garage door might be helpful for reference, so I'm probably going to keep that. I do want to delete this stuff here in the middle, so I'm going to press edit. And if I hover over any of these and I press L, that stands for link. I'm going to turn off my X-ray for a minute. I'm going to hover over this, press L for link, L for link, L for link, L for link. I can hold down L and just sort of hover if I want to. And link just selects a lot of the similar geometry. So L, 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 X delete, L, 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 L. I think I'm going to come back here, press C. Actually, I'm going to go back into X-ray mode here, and I'm going to press C, and I'm going to use my middle mouse wheel to grab that and make it bigger. And I'm going to select all of these, right click, X to delete. Okay, so now that's a much more manageable piece of geometry. All right, so now let's do a few things here. So I'm going to select the model, and it's rotated wrong. It's kind of off. So I think the first thing I want to do is actually press the in menu. I'm going to add a new stage, add a new wall, and I'm going to try to line up this back wall to this wall. And I want to make sure I'm doing this the right direction. So you can see if I look back here, these numbers are backwards. I want to make sure we're using this as the reference. So, so first let's actually type in the numbers for our main wall here. Okay, so it is 16 by 6, and I don't have the panel name, but I do know that it's 480 by 480. Okay, so now we should be able to line this model up using that wall. So I'm going to use R for rotate, and you don't want to just move it because it's rotating in all axes. So RZ to lock it to rotate just around the Z axis. So I need to rotate this RZ, and I'm going to do G for grab, Shift Z to move around and not bring the height any different. I'm just going to roughly move it into position. And you can see it looks like it's going to line up pretty well. I'm going to move it back just a little bit so we can see our wall here. And as we saw in the other example, we are likely going to need to raise up our wall off the ground. So let's go ahead and do that now. Use the Z axis. Somewhere in there. Okay. And that's going to look pretty good. Now here, I actually do know where their tracking origin is, and it's actually way back here. So their world origin is actually this Vive here, somewhere in here. I would prefer to have a very known specific point, but this is certainly better than nothing. So we actually do want to move this back. So I'm going to click on this stage, and I'm going to do G, Y to move it in the Y position, and I'm going to try to line up our world origin directly on the Vive Mars there. So if I go back here, let me hide our wall for a second. If we look at and actually let me hide this as well. Our cursor is actually off right now. This is the 3D cursor, and I can move this wherever. That doesn't really matter. What matters is this world origin where these two lines meet. And do cursor. I'm going to do cursor to world origin. So now I can see it a little easier. So now I'm going to go click on our mesh here, G, Shift Z, and I'm going to move this to be basically where our Vive Mars is. And now that should be pretty close to the world origin for this stage. So if I unhide our LED wall and I click on it in here, now I can move it back and try to line it up this way. And that's going to look pretty good. And so let's go ahead and add our other walls here. So we have a left wall and a right wall. Let's go ahead and do add. And I'm going to rename this to be left wall. And while I'm at it, I'm going to click on this one and do rename to main. And so the same settings here, 480. This is going to be 6 by 5. And now I'm going to use our position tools here to move it back. I need to rotate it. Let's see, is this the correct direction? Yeah, that's the right direction. So I'm going to do 90 degrees. Use the X to move it back to where the left wall is. Z to move it up. Y. And then I'm just going to navigate into here, get a little closer. Move the Y over. That looks good. And let me go and do that again for the right wall. So add, rename, call this right. Going to do custom 480 by 480, 6 by 5. This time we're going to need to rotate it backwards, so -90. And I'm just going to move it into place here. Okay, that looks good. All right, and now let's going to do the ceiling. So we're going to do add, rename, ceiling. Okay. This one is 500 by 500, which is the default, and it's 7 by 12. That doesn't look right to me, but that's okay. We will, let's move it into place, and then we'll see. We are going to move it back. We're going to need to rotate it around the X. That'll be 90 degrees. We need to move it up. We're going to need to rotate it around the Z. So that's going to be 90 degrees. And let's move this into position. No, that actually looks like it might be right. Yeah, I probably am missing a part of the scan too, so let's see. Yeah, I think that will be close enough. I'm actually going to bring it down just a little bit so we can see it. And it does look like there's a little bit of a rotation on the Y. Probably unintentional, but nonetheless there. That's okay. I'll leave it like that for now. And then we have this last wild wall back here in the back. So I'm going to do add, rename to wild. This one is 480 by 480 and 5 by 5. And now I'll use my position tool to move it back and over and up. And you'll probably notice that the numbers are backwards. That means the normals are backwards right now. So let's go ahead and rotate that by 180. So the normals are facing the correct direction, and there is slight rotation to this wall in this current configuration. So let's do something like that, move it back. And yeah, you get the idea. You can refine this as much or as little as you want. For most applications, you do not have to be millimeter precise, but for some you do. So it's really up to you how long you want to spend on this process. So now we can hide our mesh if we want to. That might be helpful. It might also be helpful to keep it on. But now we have our stage here, and we can go ahead and select this as is and export all, and that's going to export all of these models to a new 3D model for this stage. When you export, you need to make sure that you do not have your mesh selected. And if you do export all, it's going to select the mesh as well, unless that is in a hidden collection or something. So what we could do is we could move the mesh into its own collection by clicking on it, pressing M for move, new collection. We'll call this scan, create, and we could turn it off here in the outliner. So that's one way you could do it if you're going to do export all. Or you can just select the meshes and do export selected. And we'll just call that the same thing. When we think about exporting, you need to think about how you want these models in your DCC, whether you're using Unreal, Assimilate, Disguise, whatever. If you want these to be individual walls, then the thing you want to do is export each one of them individually. So select the main wall, do export selected. We'll call this, we'll do multi-wall main. Left wall, select it here, export selected. Left, select it here, export selected. Right, ceiling, and wild. And Assimilate, and I have some 360 video media from simplates.com that we're looking at, and we're going to look at these on our different stages. So first I'm going to go to projection setup. I'm going to go to edit. If we do load, you can import main, right, wild, left, and ceiling. And now in Live Effects, we can map these however we need to. So we can go to Mapper and we can do Map. Now let's go ahead and do projection setup. Let's drag this 360 clip into here. We'll tell it that it's 360, it's spherical, and use our multi-stage. And now if we go to Stage Manager, we should be able to see our stage working beautifully. And there's a whole other tutorial on how to do this kind of stuff in Assimilate Live Effects. That's really outside of the this tutorial, but I will show you a few things here from the stage, so you can see how we can pan the content in our stage here, and it look correct here. Let's go and look at the other example. So let's go ahead and add a stage. We'll call this curved. We'll make this the active stage. Let's do load, curved example, and you can see our camera's in the middle of our wall here, so I'm going to move it back. But this is our curved example, and you can see how it works with the camera tracking and the projection mapping. So all of this seems to be working as expected, and yeah, that's looking good. So that's the basics of using the LED Configurator tutorial. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful. Hopefully you learned a lot. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one.